black storm coming. See the lightning strike. Black people rising.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. This is part two of a two-part discussion that I'm having. Before I continue, let me introduce myself. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and for those of you who are new to the Umoja Circle, the purpose of the Umoja Circle is to correct errors where errors are found and to introduce facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction when it comes to who we are as people of African descent. You know, we know that in this society, sometimes the people get things wrong, and also sometimes people get things wrong deliberately. And we do understand the only true dialogue can there be a shift in consciousness. And that's what I tried to do by some of the topics that I'm dealing with. Now, this is, again, part two of a two-part discussion. And the first part, I started to discuss the comments and some of the pushback that I saw when this great, what I consider a great movie, The Woman King, with Viola Davis starring as Anishka, I think is the name of the character that she portrays, a woman general who became the king. And that's what I went through with the first to open this discussion out. That even though this is a fictitious, is inspired by true events, and the director of this movie, a sister by the name of Gina Prince Bythewood, 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 and again, Sister Viola Davis and her husband were the producers of this movie. Said that this person that she is portraying is a conglomeration of various different actual sisters, Agoji, which they would call the French. Some people call them the Dahomey Amazon. You know, they always have to reference their European paradigm. I tried to deal with the African perspective when I do this show. So that's the start, and I want to talk. I tried to use terminologies and how people should research, because some of the reactions, some of the comments I saw online or on Facebook or Twitter, and were from people who are highly educated, I'm assuming, but they don't know what they were talking about. But you're conditioned by the society that you're in, and we are here in the Western kind of society. Where I left off last time, I was talking about when we talk about Africans, or Africans participated in the slave trade. It's one of the things that the movie tried to address in the way it portrayed what was going on. We're talking about the movie showed around, I think it was around the 1820s. The kind of events that inspired it kind of happened a little earlier. I think like in the 1890s or so, when they fought the French army. But again, a fiction. I'm gonna reread from the last time. There's four types of scripts, fictional scripts that are written in Hollywood. You got those that are based on a true story, those that are based on true events, those that are inspired by a true story, and those that are inspired by true events, and The Woman King is the latter one. Okay, this kind of script takes a true event and tells a cinematic story with nearly all the characters that are fictional, like the Viola Davis character. Okay, so, and you tell a story. And they tell a story of a people that did exist, a kingdom that did exist, and it did it with dignity and respect. And that's all I ask for in any storytelling. And I recommend this movie. And I hope it inspires people to even though this is fictional, they could get inspired to read and learn more about the actual community. Yes, there were some people who, Africans who participated in the slave trade, a tiny amount, okay? Tiny, tiny, tiny amount. And a lot of them on the west coast of Africa, by the time that got involved with it, in fact, this is what I wanted to pick up on. The type of story that we're told is that that black people, the African people, participated in the slave trade. If you don't take things in the context of truth, then you'll go down all kinds of rabbit holes. I talked about two words before, and if you look at the first show, you will see the one word is synecdoche, which means taking a tiny portion of a truth and using it as there's the word, as the whole thing, truth, but it's a tiny part of it, but you only focus on that. Conservatives do that all the time, especially when they talk about black-on-black crime and stuff like that. Then there's another word that you must be important when you do your research, and that's epistemology. What is the source of your knowledge? Who's writing it? Why are they writing it? What are their intent? We got to understand that we got a lot of people called content providers in today's lingua franca because of the internet and all these podcasts and everybody has an opinion of bloggers and so forth. But if you don't understand the intent of the content, then you'll be sent down all kinds of rabbit holes. The justification for the Atlantic slave trade was that these people were savages, or these people were childlike, or we had to bring them to civilization and all this nonsense, and savages. And, I remember when I was a kid looking at cartoons, when they showed African people attacking Bugs Bunny or Elmer Fudd, they had bones in the nose, big lips, and want to put them in a pot. And that's how Africa was portrayed all for hundreds of years, to justify an insidious system. But they, and that all these Africans were the same people, okay? We showed the images of Africa with look, and there's hundreds, thousands of different, at least 1,500, they say, of different ethnic groups, language systems, okay? This is an important truth. You can't just say African. There's 54 countries in that country, that continent, and they are different customs, different religions, different languages, different ways of knowing, and you got to understand they did not see themselves as we see ourselves today because we came together in the 60s and tried to talk about unity and oneness. They saw no different than Europeans, a Germanic person saw a person from Rome, or a Roman saw somebody from Scandinavia, or definitely the way the Brits. And look at, and again, the Romans and the Greeks, who this Western culture says is their model. I want to show you a quote from at least two historical figures that you might find. This is Marcus Cicero. Some of you might have heard of him if you took any kind college classes. Cicero was one of the great orators of the Roman world. And he said, he's talking about Britain. You don't hear anything negative about south of Rome, okay, which I'm talking about Africa, even though later on Europeans tried to say that Africa was savages. But listen what Cicero had to say about the people north of Rome, okay? It has been ascertained, too, that there is not a scrap of silver on that island, nor any hope of booty except from slaves. But I don't fancy you will find any with literary or musical talents among them. This is how he looked. This is how the Romans looked at the Brits, the people from Britain now. Okay, and then the next one is Strabo. Strabo is a Greek philosopher. He represents the Greeks who came before the Romans. And he's talking about the people toward the north, the Scandinavians, all these countries. the home of men. These are the home of men who are complete savages and leads a miserable existence because of the cold. This is the Greeks' version. Now, they haven't, you won't hear any statements like that about Africa, the continent of Africa. Statements that somehow is not taught in school that epitomizes the best of Africa. Because the Greeks and the Romans saw wealth in Africa, okay? They saw, in Roman society, every day you got some bread as a citizen in cities like Rome, okay? And that wheat and that barley that made that bread came from the bread basket in the northern part of Africa, the continent of Africa, all right? This next image, I want to bring another point. There are those who said that there's no such thing as African women kings. Again, people who don't know from an African perspective. We always coming from a European perspective where there were queens and things. In Africa, there was no problem with the woman taking over the role of king. What you're looking at are images of, in Nigeria, 5 different areas where these women are not queens, they are kings today in Africa. Okay, so any of you who claim that, women are not, there's no such thing as women kings, these women are all kings. Let's get that straight. And this not only goes from today, it goes back to Queen Hatshepsut, who was part of the 18th dynastic period of Kemet, or what we call ancient Egypt, the pyramid builders. And before her, there was 4 or 5 other African kings. She was not Queen Hatshepsut, she was Pharaoh Hatshepsut, or king, or Pharaoh, even though it is a Greek name. They had a different concept, worldview, that has been ignored for 500 years when I'm talking about the paradigm of how we view the world as people of African descent. These ideas have been totally erased from our consciousness. Our minds, those of us who are descended from those who are part of the diaspora, whether throughout the Caribbean, the South America, North and South America, or who were sent over to Europe or in Britain and those places, through education, our minds were poured out and European thoughts were poured in. And that's what I'm trying to say with this discussion, that when you come to these conclusions, especially when you use the word slavery, or trying to give that the slavery of the European chattel slavery, which was dehumanizing, generational, profit motivating, you will find that the Africans had a different way of doing that. So when they were given, those who so-called participated in the slave trade, they were given prisoners of war. Because at that time you had empires, like I said in the first show, that were breaking up, and there were conflicts between them. They didn't see each other in the term that brothers and sisters today who had a different experiential relationship. When you have a common history, enslavement, when you had a common way of cobbling together a culture like we've done because of enslavement. When you had common experience, then you form some form of unity. Those folks of the 15th century, 16th century, and 18th century Africa were no different than the Europeans who fought viciously amongst themselves for thousands of years. If you look at British history, it's replete with slaughter and conflict. We don't have no visceral response to call them savages. If you look at the island of Japan, their medieval history with the Bushido Code, technically a samurai was a headhunter. I'm not saying it in a disparaging way, but part of being a samurai is to prove that you killed whoever you killed. And in order to prove that, You took the head off and presented it to your Lord. I, on the battlefield, killed Miyamoto, and this is his proof. That's headhunting. But do we use it in a way that is pejorative? No. But every time it comes to Africans, in Africa, we have this visceral response. But let me not digress. This next image I want to show you of this man. If you want to understand what, the narrative that you're taught in school is that Columbus and all the explorers wanted to find a way around the thing, that big old continent that was blocking them, that it was dark and nobody existed, that were intelligent, they were nothing but wild savages who were running with the animals. This is the images of Mansa Musa. In fact, that image to your right comes also found in this book. You'll see that I have. That's that image right there that you have. And this is a book called Born in Blackness. If you want, when I do my research, I don't go to the internet. I do research. This person who wrote this book, brother French, Howard W. French, took 10 years research. He scoured the archives of Portugal. But what he found in his discovery, and this is an important book to get, is that we are told that they tried, one of the reasons that they went to discover the North and South America was trying to find a route to the great wealth of Asia, okay? South Asia, which is India, and Eastern Asia, which would be the Chinese Empire. But what he discovered in this book, and I just quote some of the things I'm going to say is what I read in the book and blew my mind, is that he went to the archives literally in Portugal, okay? And he read their version of Twitter, their documents, their correspondence. And he found that, they put that image again of Mansa Musa, is that Columbus and the exploration of the west coast of Africa, Portugal first got established on that coast in 1471. But a century or so before, there was this great Hajj or pilgrimage did by this man of the great empire of Mali, Mansa Musa, okay? And in his caravan that he was taking along, there's an image, I don't know if I have that one where it shows his route, maybe, yeah, there you go. This is the route that he took from the bottom left-hand continent, that's Western Africa, and that's where the empire of Mali, the great empire of Mali, started, and the gold that was there. He carried 18 tons, okay? Not pounds, tons of gold. And he distributed along that path all the way to Cairo, and went on to Mecca. But by the time in Cairo, all this is documented. You can find it not only in Portugal, but you can find it in the archives in Cairo. And along that trail, these were literate, and they wrote about this massive thing. It did happen. I think it was in 1324 when this happened. That blew, and there was so much gold that the price of gold dropped. It affected the price of gold, and it blew the European minds. And it wasn't like the narrative said that we were trying to find that the Europeans were focusing on going to China or going to the East that sent Columbus and all the other explorers by Henry the Navigator. They were obsessed with Western Africa. It was the Africans, okay? And it wasn't until 1471 that the Portuguese finally came in contact in the area called Elmina, where the Fort Elmina, which means Elmina means the mind. Since Mansa Musa, he's the one that focused the attention of Europe, wasn't to east like the narrative said, which is wrong, it was to the west coast of Africa. And that what precipitated the slave trade. Okay? I want to show you some images that come up next. Well, this system is called the Asiento. The Asiento, there was so much wealth that came from the gold that was found that Spain didn't have to dirty the hand with slave ships. They had enough money to give out contracts. Okay, the Asiento, the system of the Negros, Asiento Negros. Next one. Yes, this is one of those contracts that other countries like England and the Netherlands and Denmark vied for, or merchants from these countries would vie for, who would bring slaves to the Spanish colony throughout the West. All right? The systems of plantations were established on an island off the coast of West Africa called Sao Tome, or St. Thomas, if you use the Brazilian Portuguese term. Brazil was discovered in 1500. So if you want to understand where the wealth came, the island of Barbados, which is about the size of quarter the size of Los Angeles, produced so much sugar. Well, Barbados produced, that was a colony of England. It produced so much sugar that England immediately became more wealthy. It was more money produced on that island of Barbados through the sugar plantation than all the galleons, the gold galleys that Spain was bringing across the Atlantic. You would think that Spain was getting that because of the galleys of gold that they were getting from South America. No, from that one island of Barbados. I think if we got some more videos I want to see if we can get to before. When you look at these images, next one. Look at these images. Next one. Look at these images. That is what the Portuguese found when they finally got to Elmina. They saw this, which ties into what Mansa Musa was bringing, because this area of Ghana is what was part of the Mali Empire before it broke off, or before it fell apart. And when the Portuguese finally hit the jackpot and got into some kind of trade agreement with the Africans, the first couple of years was not about slavery, it's about gold. This is today. This is not a picture from the 1500s or so. We're talking about today. This is what the Europeans saw Africa. Not China, not India, but Africa. They went crazy. And then they got so crazy that they started building these forts as a pretense to establish trade routes. But those forts became dungeons. Elmina Castle was built in 1482 in present-day Elmina, Ghana, formerly the Gold Coast. They even call it Coast. It was the first of many slave forts built by Europeans along the coast of West Africa. Slave fort. So they brought their version of chattel slavery, which was a different way of enslavement that was done by those people of that land who were more sophisticated. They did more of indenture. If you did something wrong or if you were captured, that was the type of, I hate using that word slavery because, again, that comes from a European perspective of how they did the Slavic people. That's the term slave came from. I don't know the African name for this system, but it was a form of indenture. And when they gave these individuals who were not their people to the European is in that context that they gave it up. Okay, so, but today come to us that black people participate in the slave trade. Well, they didn't have no reporters going to the mines and in the Caribbean and seeing what was done to the Native Americans or the Africans that were brought to those horror places by Columbus or the Spanish. They didn't see what was the result of that island that the Portuguese created called Sao Tome, where the first plantations, experimental plantations were, and they saw that the soil at that level of latitude in a warm climate was better than what they were trying to do in more northern climate, which produces a plantation system that became the sugar plantation system that the average black person, African enslaved person, only lived 7 years. Okay, and then they were permanently made to suffer. In the African tradition of that form of slavery, you became part of the family or you became part of the people. Within a generation, you were part of that culture. Totally different. So get your story straight. Understand this truth. Books like this, Born in Blackness, get it. He tells you about this. Did 10 years of research in the archives of the Portuguese, in the archives of Cairo. So what you're seeing here is not something that you could Google. You got to do the work. You got to understand the source of the knowledge that you're talking about. When I speak this stuff, I'm coming from sources. I don't have to reinvent the wheel, but there's brothers and sisters, there's black historians that you don't know about that you need to understand and study. I hope this motivates you to understand that just getting and go see that movie again, and hope it motivates you. The language is true. Those traditions that you see in the movie are true. Even though the characters may be fictitious. That's okay. That's okay. I've watched cowboy movies. I know fiction. But until next time, peace, hotep, bye-bye.